Tales of ghost ships, ghastly and cursed, have intrigued and haunted us for centuries. From phantom ships manned by the souls of the damned, to the Queen Mary, an ocean liner that echoes at night with the moans of dead sailors, and the Mary Celeste, a ship whose crew vanished into thin air. It sometimes seems there's more supernatural activity on the open ocean than in all the graveyards in the world. But are these legends real? Can they be explained away by science and logic? Or do ghosts really exist on the high seas? The sea, our planet's true final frontier. It's always been a place of mystery, and at times, tragedy. Millions of people have lost their lives here, some in disasters whose very names have become legend. The Lusitania, the Bismarck, and the Titanic have each taken more than 1,000 lives to the bottom of the sea. So what happens to these lost souls? On land, we traditionally commit our dead to the immovable earth. But some people believe that if you perish at sea, your soul can't rest. Instead, you're doomed to haunt the ocean forever, or the ship that once carried you. The history of the high seas is full of ghost stories. Legends of phantom ships manned by the souls of those long departed. And tales of empty ships floating on the waves in perfect shape, but where all those on board have mysteriously disappeared. But they're not all tales from the distant past. According to some people, there are maritime ghosts haunting us even today. The luxury liner, the Queen Mary, is now docked in Long Beach, California. Over 300 meters long with 12 decks and over 1,000 staterooms, the Queen Mary was bigger and faster than the Titanic. For nearly 4 decades, the ship ferried the world's rich and famous across the Atlantic. And as the guardian of so many, the Queen Mary performed very well. But nonetheless, not everyone survived the journey. Hundreds of people died on or around the Queen Mary, and some people are convinced that their souls are still trapped on board. In fact, the Queen Mary's ghosts have generated so much publicity that it's become a regular stop on the ghost hunting circuit. There's the phantom World War II soldier, said to appear and disappear in darkened corridors, looking for his regiment which was lost at sea. There's the spectral bride who wistfully walks through walls over and over again, as though stuck in a continual time loop on her way to the altar. And there's Jackie, the ghostly young girl whose laughter and nursery rhymes echo through the first-class swimming pool. Paranormal guide Erica Frost has been showing tourists the spectral side of the Queen Mary for years.
I would have to say that the most dangerous encounter that I've had was in the green room, which is a little sub-room in the boiler room area. And there is a male presence within that room.
Erica was leading a ghost hunting group of 15 people in the boiler room.
I had about 10, 15 people standing in front of me, facing me, and I felt a heavy presence on me. People were starting to gasp, and they said, your size, your silhouette is changing. Your silhouette is growing to about 6'3".
Erica believes that an angry, aggressive spirit was trying to invade and inhabit her body.
It was very frightening, and after that experience, our guests on the tour started having more and more traumatic experiences being touched. At one point, a woman was touched and it left a 4-finger handprint on the side of her neck, and the whole group saw it.
Spectral soldiers, angry phantoms, and ghostly little girls. Erica and others are convinced that these are the souls of people who died on the ship, both civilians and soldiers. At the beginning of World War II, the Queen Mary was commandeered by the Navy and transformed into a troop ship, carrying tens of thousands of soldiers at a time. She was so fast and maneuverable that she was even able to slip through waters patrolled by German U-boats. Hitler declared that he'd pay the equivalent of $3.5 million to whoever sank her. No one ever did. But the Queen Mary didn't escape tragedy. In October 1942, the liner carrying 15,000 troops accidentally collided with an escort ship, the Curacao. The smaller ship sank immediately. The survivors hoped that the Queen Mary would come back and rescue them, but they knew she couldn't. With German U-boats in the area, she was under strict orders never to stop. "329 servicemen from the Curacao drowned. After the war, the Queen Mary carried thousands of war brides and their family members to and from Europe. Some people believe that Jackie must have been a member of one of these post-war families, and because she haunts the pool, they suspect she must have drowned there. The ghostly bride is also said to be from this same period. Perhaps she was crossing the Atlantic to meet her future husband, but died of an illness on the way. And the phantom in uniform is said to be a victim of the Curacao collision. There are many ghost stories. But will any of these spirits appear tonight? Erica is taking us on a ghost hunt.
Any questions before we head down? No? Okay. All right. Well, follow me, please.
The first stop is a hallway Erica believes is haunted by the ghost of a young mechanic.
We're about 10 feet below the water line, and we like to come down here because a young male by the name of John likes to play with us down here from time to time. He's 18 and he passed away July 10th, 1966 during a routine fire drill right here in watertight door 13.
According to the story, John was working here in the engine room when the fire drill began. Realizing that he'd left his wrench behind, he quickly jumped back through the closing hydraulic door. But he timed his jump badly and was crushed to death. Like other unlucky souls who died on the Queen Mary, some people believe that John is doomed to stay with the ship. His ghost has reportedly been seen and heard by numerous witnesses.
Now I'm just gonna kind of, go with me. I may seem a little bit crazy, but I'm just gonna kind of call out to him and see if he'll talk with us or respond to us in any way. We're counting on you. This room is usually, he's usually the most interactive out of all of the people that we're dealing with. All right, John. We need you to talk with us. Now, if you're wanting to take pictures,
John seems to be a bit shy
in
tonight.
that direction and over here. Also,
But Erica has another means of communicating with ghosts.
Everybody can kind of see
Dowsing
you.
rods.
Okay, and then you're going to hold the one in each hand and make a fist around the outside like that. So you're kind of holding them perfect. And what is your name?
Gabe.
Gabe, very nice to meet you, Gabe. And if you want to just close your eyes for a minute, okay? And then go ahead and take a few deep breaths and release any stresses of the day. All right, you ready? Okay, John, we have Gabe here holding the dowsing rods. Is there any way that you could let us know that you're here by crossing those dowsing rods for us? Some of you...
There's something going up my leg.
You okay?
Yeah.
John.
6 months. I got this chill going up my back.
Yeah.
There they are.
Oh my gosh.
Dowsing rods are amazing. Thank you, John. We truly appreciate you being here with us.
Later, we'll come back to the dowsing rods to see if they're really touched by the icy hands of the long dead. Throughout history, there have been many legends of maritime ghosts doomed to haunt unlucky vessels. But one class of haunted ship in particular intrigues the believers. Thousands upon thousands of vessels, all swarming with ghosts. Shipwrecks. There are an estimated 3 million of them littering the floor of the world's oceans. Liners like the Titanic and the Lusitania. Spanish galleons. Arctic whalers. And Caribbean pirate ships have all been lost in the crushing depths. Their crewmen have been forever silenced. Or have they? The RMS Rhone, one of the most famous shipwrecks in the Caribbean, is said to echo with the screams of the souls who went down with her. The 95-meter-long steel steamship sank in a violent storm in the British Virgin Islands in 1867. Coral and other marine life have since covered her skeleton. Scuba diving tours take hundreds of divers to the Rhone every day. Barry Miller is a dive master.
I've been diving on the Rhone probably around 60 to 70 times. Every time I go diving, I find when I go in, I move down towards the midsection and the bow, which is the deeper bit of the Rhone, what actually happens to me is I start, getting a little freaked out.
Melisande Rowe was leading a night dive on the Rhone with a couple named Peter and Caroline.
Everything was going as usual. Because Peter and Caroline were experienced, where they were sort of exploring on their own a bit off to the side. Peter describes having felt a tug on his right shoulder of his wetsuit or his BCD.
Peter looked around, but there was nothing there.
It happened again shortly thereafter, at which point he was very spooked. He immediately went over to Caroline to find her and came to me to signal that he was going up. That was the end of it.
Badly shaken, Peter aborted his dive.
In my own experience on the Rhone, I've heard creaking, moaning, groaning sorts of sounds on dives. Enough unnatural sort of noises that I've looked over my shoulder one way or the other and wondered what world could that possibly be.
Local legends say that the ship is haunted by the 124 souls that perished with her when she sank. Rhone was the pride of Britain's Royal Mail Fleet. She was a prototype steel steamship, a sturdy vessel, commissioned to carry mail and passengers between England and the Caribbean. On the 29th of October 1867, she was following her usual route through the Virgin Islands. At 11 o'clock in the morning, the barometer suddenly dropped.
Captain Woolley was concerned for the safety of his passengers. It was October, it was late in the season, and they did not expect what was about to happen, which was, in fact, one of the worst storms to hit this area in centuries.
According to the story, as the winds picked up, all the other ships in the area fled. But Captain Woolley was sure that his sturdy steamship would be able to weather the storm, so the Rhone forged ahead. But when Captain Woolley saw the sky suddenly clear, he knew that this wasn't just a tropical storm. It was a hurricane, and the eye was directly over the Rhone. Faced with a dire choice, the captain did what he thought he had to do. He ordered the passengers to be tied to their bunks. This was a normal precaution in those days, intended to prevent injuries during the mayhem of a storm. But in this case, it was a tragic mistake. As the seas churned, a giant wave crashed over the ship. And when the cold water hit the scalding boilers, they exploded. The ship split in two and immediately sank.
Picture yourself as a passenger lashed down to a bunk. You didn't have a lot of time to react. So you would be plummeting to 80 feet of water, lashed to your bunk in a Category 5 hurricane, October 29th, 1867. Not a pleasant experience, I would imagine.
124 passengers and crew lost their lives. Only 23 people survived. Since that day, the Rhone has rested on the seafloor just off Salt Island. Few divers have spent more time at the site than Kate Brunn. She's logged thousands of hours on the Rhone and has led tour groups there. But she too has had a strange encounter.
Started off as a normal dive. There's three guests and myself. We go down, and as we're coming up on towards the mast area, I felt really strange. And as we were going into the hatchway, I felt all the hairs stand up on the back of my neck. I heard this groaning, very, very weird, strange sound. My guests heard it as well, and we all looked at each other, and I said, did you hear that?
The noise lasted for several seconds, then faded away.
There's just a feeling of that there's something there that doesn't want you to be there. It was indescribable. There was some kind of presence or something that, you know, we just shouldn't have been there that day.
When divers visit shipwrecks, do they disturb the dead? And is this the explanation for the strange presences, the tugging and the screams? Later, experts will investigate this alleged haunting. But first, we return to the ship-bound spirits of the Queen Mary.
Are you okay?
What a chill. Whoa.
You okay?
Psychic Erica Frost claims that she can communicate
exactly.
with ghosts.
Oh, very interesting. Well, thanks, John. It wasn't disappointing after all.
There are many reasons why people want to believe in ghosts. One of them is they want to believe that there's life after death and that there's something beyond just this life. Another is that people's imaginations run away with them. And, you know, they hear something, they see something, it's dark, it's spooky, and it's natural to sort of reach for a ghost explanation.
When Erica tried to contact John, the ghost of door 13, she got no reply.
All right, John. We need you to talk with us.
I think that the reason that Erica couldn't contact John is because John isn't there. There are lots and lots of people who claim to be able to talk to ghosts. Oddly enough, they never seem to be able to prove they exist. All they can do is sort of talk to them and, do they talk back?
So you're kind of holding them perfect. And
But what about Erica's dowsing rods?
okay, and then make them nice and loose.
Ben
so that they're
Radford
almost gonna
isn't
fall out.
convinced.
The claim is that dowsing rods will tend to cross, for example, when there's a positive or negative answers. They're basically fooling themselves because they're not detecting ghosts and there's no evidence that they are. Called the ideomotor effect, and basically what it is that people who are holding the rods, because they're held very loosely, so there's a lot of area for them to move around, is that people will subconsciously cause the rods to cross.
Is there any way you can just release the energy?
And so they'll read into that and they'll think, well, my God, that the rods are crossing, that's so weird. And they won't realize they're doing it. And so they'll interpret that as being a sign from a spirit.
You doing okay? Okay.
All this is very subjective, so the rods crossing or not crossing can mean whatever you want it to mean.
He's 18. He's 18, and he's...
Ben believes that the dowsing rods only moved because Gabe moved.
a lot of people... I think Gabe deserves a round of applause for that one. That was very good. Thank
There's
you.
an element of showmanship here. This is entertainment.
What would I say to a skeptic? I would say, that's great. I would say, without people who are skeptical, we would not have the questions asked that we have today. And if there's no way to fully explain it, then you kind of go, we might have something on our hands here.
The Queen Mary's ghosts make for good stories and good business. But what about the ghosts that go bump in the night, 18 meters below the surface of the sea? While she was diving the shipwreck of the Rhone in the Virgin Islands, Kate Brunn believes she had a supernatural encounter. She says she felt a ghostly presence watching her, and then heard a loud groan. It was the groan that frightened her the most, but was the sound made by a ghost? Underwater acoustics expert Peter Scheifele has come to investigate.
Just as an example, I've got a sound effect of a child's
Peter
voice.
and technician Mark Haskins
Now,
use audio mixing equipment to
How would that
simulate
sound effect
underwater
sound
acoustics.
underwater?
And they've created an approximation of the sound Kate heard.
So Mark, let's play the sound that we have on our cue here. This is what we think might be what Kate heard, or something like what Kate heard. Human beings are not good at interpreting sounds underwater for two reasons. Primarily, the human ear is not made to hear in an aquatic environment. And the other reason is because of the ambient noise of the ocean.
Even though Kate's an experienced diver, her ears, like all human ears, are simply not equipped to interpret noises underwater. So what made the notorious noise?
Marine mammals, some of them, especially the larger whales, can make very intense sounds.
Humpback whales pass through the Virgin Islands every year, and their songs are astonishingly complex. Kate had heard whale song before, but it's possible that that day on the Rhone, a whale came unusually close to the wreck.
It's kind of creepy. If you are in the water as a diver, and if, say, you're inside of a wreck, like the Rhone, humpback whale comes along, produces that sound, it can be tremendously loud. If you're in a place where you can't see the animal, if you're inside of something and it's tunnel-like, and now all of a sudden you have something that is potentially unexplainable.
In Peter's opinion, the ghost of the Rhone probably has fins, barnacles, and a pulse. But these spooky noises and strange phenomena are oddly consistent with maritime legends and superstitions. Are there in fact deeper mysteries here that science can't explain? The seas. A sailing ship is all but helpless against the mighty ocean. Danger and the possibility of tragedy lurk behind every wave. Before the age of weather satellites and GPS, sailors drew from myths and legends to explain the unexplainable. Homer's Odyssey told of Charybdis, a monstrous toothy whirlpool that swallowed ships whole. And Scylla, a grotesque creature that dragged sailors to their deaths. Early maps bore the warning, "Here be dragons," over unknown waters. And legends of such sea monsters persisted into the 19th century.
The ocean is the most mysterious place we know. We know more about space than we know about the ocean floor. Sailors would be on these ships literally scared to death most of the time because a lot of them couldn't swim. And they saw all sorts of things pop up from beneath the surface, whether they were manatee that they mistook for mermaids or squid that they thought were sea monsters. So there's no telling what they saw, but it made a great impact on them, and it scared them.
To steel themselves against the perils of the sea, sailors relied on timeless superstitions. They were rules to live and die by, and they're rules that still apply today. Larry Burzell is the captain of a Pacific fishing trawler.
The old-timers that had gone fishing with me told me, don't do this, don't do that. We're not supposed to whistle at sea. If we whistle out there, it's going to get stormy. The hatch covers have to be the right side down. If they're upside down, then you'll flip your boat.
The list is endless. On a ship, women are bad luck. So are priests and redheads. Sharks, the legends say, can sense those that are about to die. So a shark following your ship is really bad luck. Seagulls carry the souls of dead sailors, so they must never be killed. The superstitious won't leave port on a Friday. That's supposedly the day Jesus was crucified. And many sailors refuse to learn to swim, because if the sea gets a taste of you, it will eventually swallow you for good.
You don't have any control over what's going to happen to you out there. You can decide whether or not you're going, but once you've gone, it's out of your control. And the superstitions, they give you something tangible to blame the accident or the mishap or the weather or the wind on, and it helps you cope with something that you can't cope with any other way.
The rules of the sea all boil down to one ultimate law. Respect the power of the ocean, because the only thing between you and the unthinkable fathoms beneath is your ship. When two vessels meet in the vast wilderness of the open water, the crews will hail each other in mutual recognition of their precarious positions. And this is why the most terrifying thing a sailor can set eyes on is a ship at sea with no one on board. Ghost ships. Some believe that they're manned by the souls of long-dead sailors. Others think a forsaken ship will steer itself on, searching for its lost crew. But how do these derelict ships come to be in the first place? Some are easy to explain. A massive mechanical failure causes the crew members to believe the ship will sink, so they abandon her, Yet somehow the ship remains afloat. Smaller boats can be hit by a rogue wave and transformed in an instant from pleasure craft to ghost ship. But sometimes the reason for a ship's vacant decks and empty bunks isn't so easy to find. Perhaps the spookiest and most notorious ghost ship ever found was the Marie Celeste. In 1872, the brigantine De Gracia was sailing several hundred kilometers off the coast of Gibraltar when her captain, a man named Morehouse, spotted another brigantine about 8 kilometers away, a mere speck on the horizon. Morehouse and his crew went to investigate.
When they get over there, they find a very creepy scene. There are some tattered sails hanging from the yard arms. The ship's wheel is sort of spinning loose. The compass in the binnacle case, which holds the compass on deck, is fallen over and it's busted. They find a map that has a line drawn all the way to the Azore Islands, and now they are 300 or 400 miles away from there, headed back toward the Azores.
The crew had vanished. The ship's cargo, several hundred barrels of alcohol, appeared to be intact. The crew's foul weather gear and personal items had all been left behind. And according to the story, as it would be told and retold through the years, a meal was laid out in the galley, including freshly made tea.
I think these are all things that say they meant to come back. They didn't think they were going to be gone long. There were no precautions taken. The wheel was not tied off. If you were going to abandon a ship, if you were going to get off of a ship, you would tie down the wheel.
The De Gracia crew brought the Marie Celeste to the nearest port, Gibraltar, where word of the ghost ship spread like wildfire. What had happened to the crew? The captain, Benjamin Briggs, his wife, their young daughter, and all 7 sailors were never seen again.
When you have a ship that comes floating up on the sea and you have no idea where the people have gone, one of the possibilities is unlimited as your imagination as to what could have happened to them. And that's what's become of the Mary Celeste story. Anything you can think of is a possibility.
Captain Morehouse claimed that he should receive a reward for bringing in the brigantine and her cargo. And this made the authorities suspicious. They began to wonder if Morehouse had really simply stumbled upon the abandoned ship.
The problem was they ran into the Attorney General in Gibraltar, whose name was Frederick Solly Flood. He immediately thought something was wrong. He thought this ship was in too good a shape. When these guys brought this in, it was just too easy. That the crew of the Mary Celeste and the De Gracia were in cahoots, and that they had done this so they could claim salvage against the owner, and then they would split the money.
Attorney General Solly Flood called a hearing, but investigators found no evidence of insurance fraud. The press ran updates on the hearing every day, revealing increasingly salacious details. There was the bloody sword investigators said they'd found in the captain's cabin, and blood on the ship's railings. The Attorney General suspected foul play, and speculation ran wild as to who was responsible. Had the crew mutinied and then fled? And if so, why was there no other evidence of violence? The salvage hearing was the O.J. Simpson trial of its day, and Captain Benjamin Briggs, although presumed dead, became an international celebrity. Then, just as the Marie Celeste reached the height of her fame, an item appeared in a British magazine. It was entitled J. Habakkuk Jeffson's Statement. It was part confession and part horror story. Jeffson claimed to have been a passenger aboard the Marie Celeste, and he wrote that the ship had been cursed from the beginning, that a sinister passenger had been threatening the crew and the Briggs family, and that, in the end, he'd murdered them all. Jeffson's statement caused a sensation. At last, there was an answer to the mystery. But was it true? True or not, the ship was famous for being unlucky.
From the start, the Marie Celeste was a troubled ship. When it was first built, some people say that it refused to slide down the ways into the water for 3 days. People pushing, and it just stuck there, refusing to budge. On its first voyage, the captain fell ill within a day of leaving port, so bad that they had to turn around and take him home, where he died.
And Benjamin Briggs, the ship's subsequent captain, was also said to be cursed. All of his closest relatives had died horrific, untimely deaths, and all at sea. Allegedly, some sailors refused to take well-paying jobs on the ship, so convinced were they that she was doomed. Doomed or otherwise, something strange did happen to the Marie Celeste. But what was it? Tales of seaworthy vessels turning up with missing crews may seem a thing of the past. Antiquated stories from the days of brave explorers in grand sailing ships. But ghost ships still appear today. On the 8th of January 2003, 275 kilometers off the coast of Australia, it was a perfect day for fishing. The Taiwanese trawler High Aim 6 had a cargo hold packed with tuna. But something was wrong. The fish was rotting. The fuel tank was empty. All power to the ship was dead. And the crew was nowhere to be found. Yet the vessel was perfectly seaworthy. The crew's belongings were all right where they should have been. There was no sign of a struggle, and no evidence of violent weather. Then, several weeks after the discovery of the ghost ship, Australian officials found a vital clue. The family of the High Aim's lost chief engineer, Lin Chun Lee, reported receiving a mobile phone bill listing calls made after he'd gone missing. Someone had Chung Lee's mobile phone, and it wasn't Chung Lee.
In the course of the High Aim 6's last moments with her crew on board, it is quite probable that she was attempting to outrun someone.
The throttle was on full, and the ship was out of fuel.
It is quite probable that she was assailed by the modern equivalent of Blackbeard the pirate. Piracy has been with us since humans have been traversing the waters, and piracy is still with us today.
Pirates could have kidnapped the crew, thrown them overboard, and then taken the trawler for their own purposes. And when they were done with the High Aim, the pirates probably moved on, leaving a ghost ship behind. Piracy is actually more of a problem now than ever before. The annual number of reported incidents today is more than double what it was 20 years ago. So could pirates also have been behind the mystery of the Marie Celeste? Pirates ran rampant during the 1700s, but at the time the Marie Celeste made her fateful voyage, pirate attacks were rare.
The idea that pirates took the ship, it was sort of an old idea. That stretch of the North Atlantic was fairly notorious for pirates. You know, decades earlier, they would come along and they would take your ship and sell it in the next port. And sometimes they would take the crew of those ships and keep them as slaves. But this had not been happening for a long time.
But if it wasn't pirates, then what happened to these vanished souls? The disappearance of the ship's crew and passengers confounded investigators at the time and fascinated the public. Some suspected murder. There was the bloody scabbard found in the captain's quarters, and the blood on the ship's railings.
It was difficult to tell if this was rust or blood. The blood that they thought they found on the rail could have been from them fishing and gutting fish to eat.
So what had spirited away the crew? And what about the strange tale of J. Habakkuk Jephson, published in a London magazine? Jephson claimed to have been a passenger on board the Marie Celeste and the only witness to the murder of the entire crew by a deranged killer.
He told an amazing story, convincing enough that the governments in Great Britain and America launched investigations trying to find this Jephson character. They found out he existed only in the mind of a young writer named Arthur Conan Doyle, who got such a great response off of his little tale of mystery that he invented a new detective named Sherlock Holmes.
Doyle penned J. Habakkuk Jephson's statement anonymously, presumably in order to stir up a media frenzy he could later use to his advantage. And it worked. The whole account was made up, from the passenger Jephson himself, to the brutal murder, to the fresh cups of tea that were found still steaming. But the basic facts remain. The Marie Celeste was found empty, listing, but seaworthy in the North Atlantic. So what really happened to the captain, his family, and the crew? Journalist and author Brian Hicks thinks the Marie Celeste's cargo is the key clue.
One of the most interesting facts to come out of the surveyor's report in Gibraltar was that 4 or 5 barrels of the alcohol had leaked into the hold of the ship. For years, it has been accepted fact that the alcohol was just for liquor. In fact, the Marie Celeste loaded most of its cargo at Hunter's Point, and that was an industrial park. That was not a place where they were making booze. This was a place where they were making really nasty stuff like formaldehyde and ethanol and things of that nature.
The theory holds that when the Marie Celeste neared the Azores, a terrible storm hit, forcing the crew to stay below deck. In the chaos of the storm, a few barrels of chemicals cracked open. Toxic fumes seeped through the ship.
They can make you dizzy. They can make you hallucinate. It doesn't smell good.
When the weather broke, the crew finally made their escape. They fled to their only lifeboat, intending to drift behind while the brigantine aired out.
But because they didn't furl those topsails, when the wind does pick back up, Mary Celeste begins to sail, and it picks up speed, and there's no way for them to catch up to it.
Hicks believes that a small overloaded lifeboat wouldn't have been able to skip smoothly across the water, even if it was being pulled. It would have acted as dead weight, stretching the tow line to its breaking point.
So the line snaps, and they're forced to sit there in their lifeboat and watch as their ship sails away, leaving them in the middle of the ocean in a small boat.
By the time the derelict ship was found, the noxious fumes had long evaporated, and the crew was hundreds, perhaps even thousands of kilometers away, helpless and presumed dead of starvation and exposure. The Mary Celeste, the Rhone, and the Queen Mary. Caught in their wakes are intriguing stories of adventure, peril, and mystery. But a closer look reveals that the salty tales spun around these vessels were as insubstantial as sea mist, although perhaps just as captivating.